Thank you, Dr. Moscata. I'm not an Aggie, but you know, after watching those videos, I really wish that I was. They were very inspiring, and thank you so much for sharing those with us today and for inviting us to be here. So let me bring up my presentation and we'll get started. Okay, well, talk about inspiration. I hope by the time we're done today, when you think about vegetables, you will be inspired by these three concepts: health, resilience, and diversity, because that is what the World Vegetable Center is all about. And we're also about people. We work with people all over the world, with other researchers, with people who do extension work in different countries, with people who train farmers and work with farmers every day, and also with people who eat vegetables, people just like you. These are the people that the World Vegetable Center works for and with. Our center has been here for more than 40 years. We were founded as the Asian Vegetable Research and Development Center, and we had a very strong focus on countries in tropical Asia, but over time our work has expanded quite a bit. One thing that hasn't changed, we're still a nonprofit. Everything we do are global public goods, and they are available to people all around the world. This is our mission, and basically what we're trying to do is get people to grow more vegetables, eat more vegetables, and make sure that they produce those vegetables safely. Vegetables are really important for healthy lives and more resilient livelihoods. And as we go through this, I think you'll understand more about that. Now, just to give you an idea of where we're located, our headquarters are in Taiwan. We have 5 regional offices in Thailand, India, Mali, Tanzania, and our newest office in Benin. And we have projects that go on in many countries around the world. Those are the blue countries, always changing depending on what we're working on. And we also have networks that extend all around the world to different universities, other NGOs, government organizations as well. We're a very small institution, and we can't accomplish our work unless we work in partnership with others. So making linkages like this one and establishing partnerships, it's very important to us. We have about 400 staff worldwide, about 45% or so are women. Our annual budget is about 21 million US dollars, and that funding comes from a number of different sources. We have, as I said, a number of different sources for our funding. We have some long-term strategic donors, which are Taiwan, United Kingdom, USA, Australian government, Germany, Thailand, the Philippines, Korea, and Japan. And we also, like any nonprofit, are always writing grants and writing proposals, looking to different donors for support. We've had project support from, for instance, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or recently the IKEA Foundation. It's always a lot of effort to continually look for donor funding, but nevertheless, we feel our work is important, and so we continue to do so. It's a big part of what our researchers do here every day. Now, these are the crops that the center works with. This can change over time, but these are the primary crops that we do research on. And I'd call your attention to these, what we call traditional vegetables. These are crops that are eaten in a specific region. They might not be well known outside of that region, but they are very important because they tend to be very nutritious and well adapted to the places where they grow. And I'll talk more about those in just a moment. Diversity is a really important concept at World Veg, and it can work across many different levels. For the students who are studying agriculture, I'm sure you know, when a farmer grows a number of different crops, they can spread their risk out. So if they're growing diversity of crops, if they lose one, they have others that they can rely upon. Cropping systems as well, they are more resilient to climate changing and to changes in the environment if they are more diverse. Economies too, they can prosper all along the value chain if they are diverse, and there are many different kinds of ways that people can participate in those economies. And our diets as well. Can't eat the same thing day after day. You need a diverse diet to get that range of essential nutrients. Now here at World Veg, we also work in a very diverse way. Much of our research is very multidisciplinary, but we organize ourselves under what we call flagships. We have a flagship that deals with healthy diets, doing nutritional analyses, studying how to change behaviors to encourage people to eat more vegetables and have healthier diets. Our safe and sustainable value chain team, they work on production technologies and best practices for small-scale farmers. Our team that works on vegetable diversity and improvement, those are our plant breeders. They're working at the molecular level to improve our crops. And all of these interact very closely with our Genebank, which is the heart of our institution and which you'll be hearing about more from Dr. Maarten in just a moment. But if you look above here, you can see a team called Enabling Impact. And their role is quite important because they are going back and helping us learn. This is how we understand the impact of our work. These are our agricultural economists, our socioeconomists. They study what we have done and help us get good feedback from the field about the impact that we are having and how we can learn and adjust our activities accordingly. Now, many people around the world are working on issues of hunger, but World Vegetable Center is especially interested in hidden hunger or micronutrient deficiencies in the diet. It's a serious problem worldwide. For instance, the lack of vitamin A in the diet is one of the leading causes of preventable blindness among young children in sub-Saharan Africa and also in India. So we would like to find ways we can intervene with vegetables to help address some of these issues. But of course, I'm sure you're all aware of what's happening right now worldwide. And that's that there are more people who are overweight than there are people who are hungry. And there are billions of people who are malnourished because their diets are not balanced. And this lack of nutrients in the diet, it can happen anywhere. As a country is developing, people might not have access to different kinds of food, or they might not be able to afford a diverse diet. But as people become wealthier, they tend to eat more processed foods, foods that are higher in fat and salt and heavy on the starch. And what's happening is all around the world, there are rising rates of obesity leading to type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and other non-communicable diseases. And we can address some of this through diet. So what you eat is really important. Now, there's a few ways to get those nutrients. You can fortify food. You can take vitamin supplements. You can grow vegetables to be enhanced for particular nutrients. We've done some of that work here at World Veg. But from our perspective, the best way for people to get the nutrients they need is to eat a lot of different kinds of fruit and vegetables every day. Now, World Veg and the World Health Organization recommend that people eat 400 grams of fruit and vegetables daily, which is about the weight of a football. So, are you eating that much every day? Ask yourself. If you're not, and you probably aren't, because very few people around the world do, there's a lot of scope here to improve your diet with vegetables. This slide shows where cultivars that have been bred at World Veg have been released around the world. We've had a lot of success with tropical tomato. We've been working on mung bean, very important crops since the beginning of our institution. And other crops we've had good success with, peppers, soybean, vegetable soybean, and also traditional vegetables as well. So our breeding continues to have reach, and we share our improved lines and improved cultivars with other plant breeders and seed companies around the world. Vegetables are an excellent investment. As I mentioned earlier, we have that Enabling Impact team, and they've done some research on areas where World Veg has been active in Eastern and Southern Africa. And we now know that about half of the tomato and nearly all of the African eggplant seed that's produced in the region were varieties that developed by World Veg. And that is leading to some significant benefits economically in the countries throughout those regions. So investing in vegetables, it's a worthwhile proposition. Forget about Bitcoin, forget about gold, do vegetables. We work with farmers to produce vegetables safely. This is critical, and I'm sure you're aware that the misuse of pesticides is very common around the world in many places. It's bad for the farmers, unhealthy for them, damages the environment, and of course is not safe for consumers. Producing vegetables safely is something we really want to emphasize, so we work on integrated pest management packages, protected cultivation, pheromone traps, different cultivation methods, biocontrols as well, to help farmers grow their crops and grow them safely. World Veg is also active in developing innovations like vegetable grafting, simple rain shelters farmers can use, developing different rootstocks that help farmers overcome diseases in their soils or when they have flooded soils. All of these are start with research, then we pilot them, and if they're working well, then we try to bring them up to scale to as many farmers as we can. Now, vegetables, they're important for health, but also for a healthy agricultural economy. For a couple of reasons. They tend to generate a higher farm income and more jobs than other crops, especially staple crops. So if a farmer has a small land holding and they're just growing rice or cassava or maize, well, if they were growing vegetables, it's more likely that they would bring more income into their household. Very important for women and young people. These are two target groups for us. Lots of opportunities there for people to grow vegetables, especially in urban areas and in peri-urban areas. Vegetables can create a lot of economic activity, not only in producing, but also in distributing and processing as well. But of course, you've got to get the vegetables to the market, and that is very challenging in a lot of the countries where we work. There's not much post-harvest storage, no place to keep those vegetables until prices change, the roads might not be good, and so on. So we work on different technologies to help farmers protect their crops, like this device here, which is called a zero energy cooling chamber. It's just bricks and sand. But when you wet it down through the process of evaporation, you put the vegetables in the center, helps to keep them fresh. Now, this is the gene bank we keep talking about. We have the world's largest public collection of vegetable germplasm, or seed, here at our gene bank at World Veg headquarters in Taiwan. I won't say more because Dr. Maarten will explain it all, but suffice it to say that this is a valuable and precious collection for everyone around the world. And why do we need such a big collection? Well, as you know, the climate is changing all around us, and we need good, resilient varieties that can tolerate heat and drought and produce well in the conditions that we're already experiencing and in those to come. So our breeders are looking at wild relatives like this one. This is a wild relative of tomato. Doesn't have a very nice plant habit. The fruit it produces is not very tasty, but it has very good genes for drought and heat, and those are the kinds of things that our breeders are looking for to develop and improve varieties for farmers like this one. Now, all around the world, we depend on about 15 or so crops, but in fact, there are thousands of plants that we can eat and benefit from and enjoy. These are a couple that you might recognize. I think moringa is a very popular crop in the Philippines. I don't know if you're familiar with spider plant or amaranth. How about nightshade? A lot of these crops are very important in different places around the world. We are particularly interested in spider plant and amaranth. These are C4 plants, very efficient at photosynthesis, very tolerant of heat and drought. And we are doing selection of these crops in our offices in Africa. We think they will be very important for people there going forward. We do a lot of training at World Veg. That's a big part of our activities. If you're interested, you can take a look at our website and see what we've got coming up. But sharing our knowledge and learning from others as well, that's a very important aspect of our work. We also promote vegetables in lots of different ways, through webinars like this one, through farmer field days and cooking demonstrations. We've had school garden programs in the past. We publish recipes and production guides in different languages, all to encourage people to produce vegetables safely and to eat more vegetables by trying different ways to cook them. Now I get to the very important part. The World Vegetable Center is an open science center, and that means we are welcoming people from all around the world to come and work with our researchers, from different institutions, different universities, from the private sector as well. We have research fellowships for master's and PhD students, and we would love it if you would come and study with us. It would be great. You can come for 6 weeks or 3 months or do your PhD work in 2 years. Join us. We look forward to it. And if you join us in the coming years, by 2022, we hope to have a new lab up here on our campus. We are recently undergoing a massive research infrastructure modernization project, part of which will be a new laboratory. We're very excited about that. We hope to be breaking ground in probably another month or so. And we've already started building a new virology greenhouse and an insectary, and also some very special gardens where we can demonstrate some of our improved varieties and best practices. So I do hope you'll come and work in that new lab someday. So just a few things to remember before I close. The first is vegetables. You got to eat them. They're vital for your health. They have the nutrients you can't get from any other source. Also good to remember that our research here at World Veg builds on genetic diversity. Our breeders need that diversity that we have in our gene bank for the traits that farmers require as the climate changes. They need good, resilient varieties that can produce well in difficult conditions. And finally, vegetable production. It's one of the best ways we know of to generate income, create jobs, and improve the lives and livelihoods of small-scale farmers and their families all around the world. So with that, I'll say thank you so much to everyone, and I turn it back to Joan. Thank you.
And thank you for the invitation to give a presentation in this very exciting webinar. So let me share my screen. One moment, please. Okay, so thanks again for the invitation. And I will continue to talk about vegetable diversity for healthy lives and resilient livelihoods, and how the Genebank of the World Vegetable Center can play a role in that. Just a recap: vegetables for health and resilient livelihoods. Vegetables can be considered a cheap and sustainable source for vitamins and minerals in your diet, and at the same time, they're also a high-value crop for vegetable producers. So it's a very interesting crop group because it helps to improve diets, it helps to improve livelihoods, and it's also so interesting because there's so many crops of vegetables, and within those crops there's so many varieties in different villages, different countries. People prefer different types of varieties of vegetables. So I really encourage everyone to put a bit more diversity in your diet. As you may remember from the presentation from Maureen, that one of the flagships of World Vegetable Center is about vegetable diversity and improvement. And in that program of vegetable diversity and improvement, we start with the gene bank, where we safeguard 65,000 accessions, about 65,000 accessions of more than 450 species, with accessions from more than 150 countries. What do I mean with an accession? Accession is a technical term for each seed sample that we conserve in our gene bank. So a seed sample can come from a variety. Most of the varieties that we maintain, we consider them to be land races, which are those varieties which have been maintained by farmers within communities for generations. So these varieties have evolved with the culture and with the environment of the people in those communities. And many of these land races have been collected in the 80s, 70s or 60s of the last century, and nowadays probably are not existing anymore in those communities because farmers, they rightly adopted improved varieties with which they increase their yield and also their income. Now, if these farmers replace those land races, why should we conserve those land races? Well, we need to conserve those land races because that's the very basis for breeders all around the world to develop the improved varieties that have replaced these same land races. So that is a kind of apparent paradox where we are replacing in agriculture the land races, which are the basis for breeding and sustainable agriculture, to develop improved varieties for farmers to address climate change, diseases, and of course, market preferences. So we maintain those land races in our gene bank, and not only those, we also maintain crop-wild relatives. And I will come back later to that. So those are the genetically relative species of the vegetables that we eat. For example, tomato, they're tomato wild relatives. So those are different species as tomato, and they might grow maybe in the desert or maybe on the rocks in a wild vegetation. We probably don't eat those wild relatives because they have small fruits. Sometimes they taste bitter, but they might maintain many important traits that can be used in breeding and pre-breeding to develop these improved and resilient varieties. So accessions can mean land races, it can mean crop-wild relatives, it can mean also some improved varieties, which we keep in our gene bank. 65,000 accessions in total. And our aim is to make this vegetable diversity available for the development for quality vegetable seeds, which are accessible, affordable, and acceptable to farmers. So for that, we have to collaborate with partners, including universities, including seed companies, including local and national governments, NGOs, to do the research. First, do the conservation in the gene bank, do the research which of these accessions from the gene bank have interesting traits. So we do that in a phase which we call pre-breeding. And then when we have identified interesting germplasm, as we would call it, interesting materials, interesting seed samples from our gene bank for specific traits like a specific disease, resistant to a specific disease or climate stress, we can use that in breeding programs to develop new varieties that can be used by farmers to produce vegetables. So this is a concept that I would like to share with you that is adjusted from one of the, I would say, landmark papers in the use of genetic diversity from Tanksley and Mecozzi in Science, a publication from '97. And I've slightly adjusted to show you how genetic diversity changes over within a system. So here we have three situations: alleles in local seed systems, alleles in gene banks, and alleles in approved varieties. And with alleles, I mean the different variation, the variation that we find in a specific gene. So you can see that in local in rural area where farmers exchange seed or purchase seed from local markets or still maintain some of the varieties that they like, with each harvest they still save some seeds to grow the crop next year. So in those local seed systems, we can still find a lot of genetic variation within a specific gene. Now, in the gene bank, we try to conserve part of the genetic diversity, but we have to be realistic that we cannot conserve all the alleles or all the genetic diversity which is out there still in these local seed systems. And then breeders, researchers will take out some material from the gene bank to develop improved varieties, and then they, through selection and purification, those lines will also have a reduced variation within the final product, within the final lines. So you can see how the diversity declines from local seed system to the gene bank to improve variety. So the gene bank conservation we call ex situ conservation, and the conservation of genetic diversity in local seed systems we call in situ conservation. So to sustain breeding and research on crop diversity, we try to establish a good system of ex situ conservation, from which breeders and researchers can get a hold of genetic variation, and where we can at least safeguard a part of the genetic variation which is out there in the local seed systems and which is threatened because it's each time more and more replaced by improved varieties without making sure that these local varieties are being conserved. Now, why is it important to conserve those landraces? I already explained it slightly, but hopefully this example will explain it further. Because, okay, if farmers replace their traditional varieties or their landraces with improved varieties, we would think that, okay, why should we conserve those landraces? But they have so many different traits that at the moment we might not need, but in another place, in another environment, or with another market, or in the future, we might need we might need to use them in breeding new varieties. So here's an example of tomato of a specific volatile that is responsible for part of the taste of tomato, which of course is very interesting to breed new, tasty, delicious tomatoes. And in this graph, I will check if I can use the pointer, or graph or picture. You can see 4 types of tomato. So we see the modern tomato, the one that you buy in the supermarkets. Then transitional one, these are tomatoes maybe that we could have found in the last decades in farmer fields. And then we have heirloom varieties, which are varieties, local farmer varieties. We call them sometimes land races because they have been developed over generations of farmer families or farmer communities. And then we have Cerasiforme, which is the wild ancestor of tomato. Now, within each type of this tomato, we can see different types of allele combinations, in this case of this specific volatile, which is responsible for tomato taste. The exact name of this volatile is MHO. Not important, it's just to illustrate the case. So here you see a legend with different colors, with different codes, AAA, AAR, etc. And you can see that R is the reference line, the one is the reference allele, the allele that we find most of the time in our commercial varieties, in our modern varieties, and A is the alternate allele on 3 genes. So we have 3 letters, 3 genes, and alternating alleles. So the basic message is that in modern varieties, we have very little variation. We have only 2 combinations, ARR and RRR. And when we go back to the transitional varieties, the ones that are between the modern varieties and more the heirloom varieties or land races, as we call them, they still have some other variations, which means also different types of taste. And then if we go back to more the land races, you can see that already there is some more variation, which means more diversity of taste. And then if we go to Cerasiforme, we also see other types of variation, in these three specific genes which are related to this volatile responsible for the taste. So you can see how these land races or hill-room varieties and wild relatives, in this case, Cerasiform, Solanum cerasiform, the wild relative, the wild ancestor of tomato, how they still contain a lot of trait variation related to this specific volatile. And this example stands for many other traits. So if we don't conserve these land races and wild relative in the gene bank, we lose a lot of variation that we can use to develop more tasty or more resilient, better producing varieties. Now, this looks like a complicated pipeline. We call it germplasm screening pipeline. So the germplasm, the material the living material that can be propagated. Here we have a small model how we can use a gene bank in a breeding pipeline or screening pipeline to in the end develop these varieties. So above we have a gene bank, many different accessions, which are then land races, crop out relatives, and then we can develop from this gene bank collection for a specific crop, let's say tomato. So we have a tomato collection of about 8,600 accessions. So you can imagine that for breeders, it's very difficult to select germplasm from there. So we develop first a core collection, which is a smaller set of accessions, which represents the diversity from this large gene bank. And then that subset, which represents the diversity of the large gene bank, can be used for phenotyping, which means we evaluate the germplasm for specific traits of our interest, which can be related to the taste or to a specific response to disease or resilience to heat, drought, etc. And then after phenotyping, we can use other type of techniques like genotyping the accessions, and using a gene-wide association study to link genotypes to traits to identify which accessions and which gene, which parts in the genome and maybe even specific genes are responsible for the response for the phenotypic expression. So once we have identified the phenotype and we have identified the genotype, we can select those accessions from the core collection and use them in our breeding programs. And here there's a picture of, again, a crop route relative, in this case of a pepper, and actually it's not one crop route relative, these are many different wild chili peppers. Because also in the screening pipeline, you can use crop route relatives in the phenotyping and genotyping and breeding. So how do we connect it to the users? So in the middle, we have the gene bank. And then again, we talked about partnerships. So we collaborate with national governments or local government, national agriculture research centers, with researchers all around the world, breeders, and sometimes also directly with farmers, although in most of the cases we work with researchers and breeders and national partners who then will reach out to the farmers. So researchers and breeders might especially be interested in accessions, specific accessions from our collection or core collections, which they want to phenotype, and from that they develop breeding lines that then they can provide to farmers. We also, in the World Veg Gene Bank, we have a special program on seed kits where we have already selected some lines of traditional vegetables which are normally not considered in public or private breeding programs. And we have selected of these traditional vegetables which are very nutritious and rapidly growing some lines that perform well, and we put them in seed kits together for home garden and school garden development. And they can be sent directly to farmers. And then, especially with the national partners, it's important to monitor and conserve the local vegetable diversity to make sure that that diversity is being maintained. So, in World Veg, we can already talk about a World Vegetable Germplasm Network, where we have our main gene bank in Taiwan. It's called the Genetic Resources and Seed Unit. And in Tanzania, we have a regional gene bank which focuses particularly on the traditional African vegetables. Then we keep a safety duplicate in Korea and in the National Gene Bank of Taiwan. About 50% of our accession has a backup in these two gene banks, and that in the next years we work to get that to 100%. About 24% of our collection has already also have a backup in Svalbard. You know, the global seed vault. Some people say doomsday vault, but I prefer to say global seed vault, where all the gene banks from the world can deposit seeds, including the gene banks from the Philippines, so that if in some case of a disaster and our gene bank, there will be some problem with our gene bank, we can recover our seed from Svalbard. And then in India and in Thailand, in our breeding programs of legumes and bittergourd, pumpkin and loofah, also seed is directly distributed of these specific crops to researchers and breeders around the world. And quite a few people so far have requested seed. So since the establishment of the gene bank in 72, in the last century, almost 700,000 samples were sent to 204 countries and territories. And we put the territories, or because I think officially there are like 198 countries. So that, so maybe during the time some countries don't exist anymore. But I think the general point is that we basically send germplasm seeds of our breeding lines and gene bank accessions to people all around the world. And here you see some red lines, and those are the countries where we receive most seed requests from. So that especially in Asia and the Philippines has a very big red line. So we have been very happy to send a lot of seeds of our breeding lines and gene bank accessions to partners in the Philippines, and happy to continue doing so. And here you see a picture of some of our crops that we have. We have a huge diversity in our gene bank. I think on a square meter, we have on a square seat, on a square meter in our gene bank, we have so much diversity, crop diversity, which you can see here below. And the diversity is being packed in small aluminum foils so that we can keep the seed viable. And these are pictures of Svalbard, where we have about 24% of our collection as a backup, which we also want to increase until 100%, but you may understand that that takes time. And that's where we deposit our black boxes. And I'm sure that also from gene banks in the Philippines, some black boxes may be kept there high near the North Pole. This slide you already saw, and I just wanted to emphasize that besides the gene bank, we have also breeding programs. So these breeding programs develop breeding lines. So at the World Vegetable Center, we distribute gene bank accessions, very diverse germplasm for breeders and researchers, and breeding lines, which can also be used in breeding programs, but also directly used for production. And for example, World Vegetable Center collaborates with breeding consortia in Asia and Africa with small, intermediate and large seed companies to scale out our breeding lines and reach farmers who then can have access to affordable and resilient seed. And remember what we talked about, my reference to the core collection. We have one example at WorldVeg, a successful one, with Mungbean, the Mungbean core collection, or actually I should say the mini core, which is even smaller than a core collection. So our collection of Mungbean is about 8,000 accessions, and we have a mini core which captures most of the diversity of the big collection in a small collection of 300 accessions, which then can be grown in the field for phenotyping. And already in more than with 14 partners are evaluating this mini core, and in that way, in this network, the partners can share information, and by collaborating together, we can get a comprehensive understanding about the phenotypes and the potential traits in this mini core. So, how to request seeds of our Genebank. So here's the webpage of our Genebank and of our Genebank information system, Afgeris. And when you go into this website, you can check our passport data, which means the data information about what kind of species have been collected, where have they been collected, in which country, and when were the accessions being collected. So here you can look for the species of your interest. So your genus, for example, tomato is Solanum, and then the species is Lysopersicum. And then if you're interested in a specific country, such as Philippines, you can also search there. And when you have identified the accessions of your interest, you can note down the VI codes, as we call them. Here it's VI 000001. So afterwards you can send us these codes, and we can search in our Genebank and send the seed to you. Each seed request has a small processing fee to cover the cost of the Genebank, but we try to minimize the processing fee, especially for universities and public sector institutions in developing countries, so that everyone can access the germplasm. And here, this is still a relatively old slide. It says 62,620 records. Currently, that's about 65,000. Then there's also characterization data. That means morphological data about fruit type, fruit size, days to maturity, days to flowering, some morphological data that can help you in the selection. And then with respect to the improved lines, the breeding lines from our breeding programs, you can go to this website, and there you can select breeding lines. And then once you have made your selection, you can go to this website and fill in the seed request form. And I know that we ask a lot of information. So if you have some doubt, you can always write to the email which you find below, seedrequest@worldveg.org, and we can help you in case of any question. So for the distribution of the Genebank accessions, you remember the landraces, the corporate relatives, we distribute the germplasm, the seed, with a standard material transfer agreement, which is an agreement with several clauses about how you're going to use the material. Now, this is a standard one which has been accepted by all the governing the members of the parties that have rectified the International Treaty of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, and I believe the Philippines is one of them. It's being supported by the FAO, the World Food Organization, so It's a commonly used standard material transfer agreement for Genebank accessions. So before you request seed from our Genebank, using the standard material transfer agreement, you have to register yourself on this website, which is the website of the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. It's very easy to do, and it's not only for our Genebank, but also for other Genebanks. For example, the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines, they have a very big Genebank for rice. So if you're interested to request rice seed, then please go to that Genebank, and they will also distribute germplasm with a standard material transfer agreement. So by registering on this website, you can not only receive germplasm from the World Vegetable Center, but you can also request seeds in other international Genebanks which also use the same standard material transfer agreement. Now, there are a few international Genebanks in the world. I already mentioned the International Rice Research Institute. So that is a Genebank for rice. In the World Vegetable Center, we are specialized in vegetables and also some legumes such as mung bean and soybean. So that is our competitive advantage, so to say, our niche. And well, we are happy to receive any request. For the breeding lines, we have another material transfer agreement, which you can, if you want to read it in more details, here is the link to the website. Now, besides the breeding lines and the Genebank accessions, we have also another product, which are the seed kits, which are especially popular in Africa, with many of the traditional African vegetables, which are nutritious, which are linked to local cultures and gastronomy, and might also be adapted to drought or flooding or high temperatures. And here are a few popular ones: amaranth, jute mallow, spider plant, African nightshade, cowpea leaves, African eggplant, Ethiopian mustard, okra. Some of these vegetables might also be popular in the Philippines. And we put small seed packs together in a bigger seed kit, as we call it, together with a small instruction how to grow them and also how to prepare the vegetables. And then in collaborative project with national government organizations or local government organizations or NGOs, these seed kits are being distributed to farmers, for example, for disaster relief or to improve nutrition. And I will just show a small video. Let's see if it works. Okay, well, it's already finished, but I understand that I was the only person who could hear this small video. But just to show you how these traditional African vegetables, or also traditional Asian vegetables, can help to diversify farm systems and also the diets of people. And we also distribute seed kits to the Philippines during the COVID pandemic. Until now, about 1,500 seed kits in collaboration with the Bureau of Plant Industry in the Philippines, and with support also of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Taiwan, to help some communities which have been affected by COVID. And of course, 1,500 seed kits might not help so many communities. So that is why it's also important to work with, as we call it, champion farmers or custodian farmers or lighthouse farmers, those people in communities who are leaders or who have a vision and who can, a vision about sustainable agriculture and nutrition, and who can multiply seeds within their communities and also stimulate and inspire other peoples to grow these traditional vegetables. And then by finalizing this presentation, I would like to go back to the loss of land races and wild varieties. And we call that process genetic erosion. And at the beginning of this year, a paper came out, quite alarming paper, about the decline of biodiversity for food and agriculture, and that this needs urgent global action. Because in all societies around the world, all cultures, people eat more of the same. And also the production systems around the world are each time more of the same, with less crops. So that means that many of these traditional vegetables are not being used anymore, not being known anymore, not being eaten anymore, and eventually they will be lost, or at least the local populations and a lot of the crucial diversity of these traditional vegetables, and as well as their crop wild relatives, which often are occurring at the border of farmlands or just in the hills besides farmlands. So it's important to conserve these land races and wild relatives. And here's an example in Northern Africa, in Morocco, where in 2018 they interviewed farmers about for which crops, vegetable crops, they still had land races. And well, you can see there are you can see where there are only a few crops for which they maintain still cropland races, and for most crops that they grow, they already lost the land races, especially for tomato, which is the most commercial crop in that region. So if we don't have a plan to conserve those replaced land races, we cannot use them anymore for breeding new varieties. And I'm sure that these cases happen in other parts of the world, including in the Philippines. So for that, we need to join forces, and we've tried to do that, for example, for a specific case on cucurbits, including loofah gourd, bitter gourd, cucumber, pumpkins, and together with gene banks around the world and the Crop Trust, which is an international organization that supports the global seed vault, and gene banks all around the World Vegetable Center, but also the Asian Pacific Seed Association, we are developing a global strategy for the conservation of cucurbit diversity, understanding which gene banks maintain accessions of pumpkin, bitter gourd, loofah, cucumber, and other cucurbits, where there are gaps, for example, countries where the land races not have yet been conserved, where do these crop relatives of these crops occur, and how can we conserve them? And especially South and Southeast Asia, including the Philippines, are very rich in cucurbits. I've heard that you have wonderful bitter gourd land races in the Philippines, for example, loofah pumpkin, and in the Genebank of the World Vegetable Center, at this moment we are thinking and looking for partnerships, how we can collect and safeguard this cucurbit diversity from South and Southeast Asian countries. So the conclusions of my presentation: in World Veg we employ multiple pathways to connect vegetable diversity to people for healthier lives and more resilient livelihoods, establishing partnerships with many different stakeholders. Vegetables deserve more attention in global research and development efforts. Often they might be neglected. That's especially the case in traditional vegetables. And that traditional vegetable diversity also requires urgent conservation. And especially these vegetables, which are often underutilized and neglected, and also the wild relatives of vegetables, are threatened and poorly conserved. Although we have conserved, of course, part of it in our Genebank, that's part of our job. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and happy to receive any question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. I think our viewers have really that's actually a very good presentation. I myself was very intrigued with your presentation because I'm also very interested in plant breeding and of course also in gene banking. So now we will go to our question and answer session. We actually have a lot of questions that flooded our comment section. So I'd like to apologize in advance if we can cater to all the questions because of our limited time. But for our first question and answer session, we have a senior faculty member of Xavier University College of Agriculture under the Agricultural Sciences Department. He is also my teacher way back in college. So please welcome to give his reaction and to ask some questions, Mr. Floro Vidalapag. Hi, Sir Floro.
Hello, good afternoon. So thank you very much to Maureen and Dr. Martin. So very interesting presentation. So I'll go directly to my question because of shortage of time. So I'll start with Dr. Martin. I have a little background on breeding, so I'm interested in getting some breeding lines in the future. Hopefully we can establish through our dean future collaborations. When we get, can we get a brochure of the breeding lines? Since one of your expertise is diversity analysis, part of the information that comes with the breeding lines are where they come from in a particular country, specifically the environment. Does it include, say, temperature, elevation information from which the original breeding materials came from? Since our problem in the past when we import seeds would be acclimatization. So meaning they might perform well in the stations, but when we plant them in specific areas in the Philippines, they are no longer responding well to our environment.
Yeah, by the way, that's an excellent question. Thank you. For our breeding lines, in our seed catalog, there's a small summary of the traits that you can expect for those breeding lines. So I cannot recall now if there's also traits related to drought or heat, but we hope that that small summary of traits can help you to make a decision which of these breeding lines suit your situation. And we will, it's a good comment. Now for the Genebank accessions, you can check the country of origin and in some cases also the location. Unfortunately, at this moment, we don't provide the climate in that specific, from that specific location. But in the future, and you give me a very good idea, thank you again for your question. If we have the village from where it was collected in the past, we can check the climate with historic climate data from the specific village and additionally provided information. So at this moment, we are not able to provide that climate information, but with your question, you raise a very interesting topic for a future project. And for the moment, you can just try to look on the basis of country origin and the locality to get an understanding or an estimate about the specific climate.
Thank you. So I have a question for Maureen. Other than the commonly grown vegetables, you've shown that you also have studies on amaranth and moringa, especially crops which are also grown in Africa, which climate is almost similar to the Philippines. I've been following up the small moringa project. You claim small moringa project.
Mhm.
I understand that AVRDC before conducted. I was checking what happened to the in the internet, but I couldn't get the summary information from that particular evaluation of moringa accessions. Can we request for the data of such particular project?
This is the project going back a number of years, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. World Veg has what we call Harvest, which is our data and document archive. And if I could, I'll open the chat box and put the link in there. If the information that you're searching for isn't there, you can always send me a message and we can try and find it for you. We've been making a big effort to kind of collect work that has been done here in the past and make sure that it's available to as many people as possible through Harvest. So if it's not there now, we'll do our best to try and find it for you and share it. So you're looking for the specific data though, just not articles that have been published based on the research. Is that's what you want? Okay. Yeah. So I'll put up that link and then you can have a look through. And if you see what you need, great. And if you don't, please let us know. So thank you.
Thank you also very much. I have one last wild question for Dr. Maarten. For in the evaluation of in the preservation of the germplasm, we have a very good program. In the genotyping, do we include gene sequencing? And the one question is it not possible to reconstruct the lost genes through the modern DNA and RNA technology? Doc?
Thank you for these two questions. Well, this is not my specialty about gene sequencing. We have our flagship leader, Roland Schofleitner, who is really specialized in this part. But I can tell you that that part of our collection has been started being genotyped, especially the Solanaceae collection, which means the capsicum pepper or the chili pepper, a tomato and eggplant, and they have been sequenced by what is it? I don't have the term now, but they have been genotyping by sequencing. So we have large sets of SNPs around the whole genome, but not the complete genome of these accessions. But what we do then is, on the basis of these data from low density genotyping by sequencing, we establish a core collection, and that core collection can be more densely genotyped, so we can get a better understanding of the variation in the genome. And I'm not sure if it's possible to reconstruct lost genes, but what is very interesting is that at this moment they're also trying to convert different genomes within a specific crop gene pool, so landraces of the tomato, for example, and also the wild ancestor, to understand how domestication has evolved over time and where, on which specific parts of the genome we have high selection, and low selection. So where have we lost a lot of genes or a lot of allele variation, and where we have not lost that. So with that, we can reconstruct in which parts of the genome we have still a lot of potential for breeding, and where we simply lost, we don't have a lot of space anymore for the breeding because we lost already the genetic variation. Now, when we know that, we probably can go back to our wild relatives to try to regain that lost material. Now, what I'm explaining now is something. These are ideas that are floating around also here in WorldVeg, and I think with many researchers. And we are just at the start of this revolution of, genotype, gene sequencing, gene editing, etc. So I'm really excited to be here at the World Vegetable Genebank Center. It's a hotspot of crop diversity, and try to start understanding the genetic variation that underpins that diversity.
So let's go first. I think this question is for Miss Maureen. So the question here is, does the World Vegetable Center accept undergraduate internships? And if so, what is the process?
We do sometimes. And the process is, if you go to our website, we have an application form. You fill it out, and then we'll take it from there, discuss with your university and with your professors, and see where it might be a good fit. Usually we work with master's and PhD students, but sometimes we do have undergrads. So.
Okay, see, thank you so much. So yes, to our undergraduate students, and of course to those who also wants to PhDs and masters, please check out the website of World Vegetable Center. So now let's go to questions. I think this is for Dr. Maarten. Mr. Alexander Morados, one of our audience, is asking, do you include indigenous vegetables in your gene bank, such as edible fern, Diplasium esculentum, bago, netum nemon, and bamboo shoots? Are there specific protocols for breeding or germplasm collection for indigenous vegetables?
A lot for that interesting question. Edible fern. No, we don't have that in our collection, I think. But you never know. I think what we're focusing really in our gene bank is on seed producing crops, and not on crops that are developing spores, which require another type of propagation. Bamboo shoots, it's a very good question. I'm not particularly sure. I know that there's also an international research center on bamboo. They might have a bamboo gene bank, but in our case, with the traditional vegetables, in the case of Asia, we focus, for example, on okra, lap bean or hyacinth bean, bottle gourd, wax gourd, a lot of cucurbits, traditional cucurbits, a lot of traditional leafy vegetables such as kangkong or amaranth. So of the 4 species that were mentioned, I did not capture the 2 of them, but if the person can write it in the chat box, we can check later on, and his email direction, I can follow up with him directly. Now, do we have special protocols for these vegetables? Actually, we have, because our curators, they have a special protocol to how to multiply the seed of these traditional vegetables. As we have many of leafy vegetables and cucurbits mainly, and also how to phenotype or describe the morphological traits of these traditional vegetables. And I'm happy to follow up and show where we have those protocols.
And now, since you've mentioned the plants or the vegetables that Genebank. So there is another question here. So he is, Mr. Eli Humalan is asking, are potatoes included in the Genebank? If yes, then would the germplasm come in tubers or in vitro?
Oh,
Oh,
in the past, there was a very interesting sweet potato collection at the World Vegetable Gene Bank, and people still think nostalgically about that collection, but that collection has been moved to the International Potato Center in Lima, Peru. So in Peru, there's the potato gene bank, and happy to whoever asked the question, I can provide you more information about how to request potato germplasm from the gene bank. And then how the germplasm goes to your place, I think that's best to tell the person from the gene bank can tell. The only, so I will keep it there. So no potato from our gene bank.
Yes, I see. So it's actually moved to Peru. So now I think this is for Miss Maureen. There is a question. So I think Sir Flora also touched on this subject earlier. So how can universities partner with the World Vegetable Center on research projects?
okay. Well, typically, if there's a topic that you're interested in, that you'd like to follow up on, and you can present an idea to one of our researchers here, somebody who's in the same field perhaps, and you just have to start talking about it. I think that's how all projects begin, with some kind of a discussion, or somebody reaches out to someone else. You've got an idea, you're looking for partners, you're looking for input, and then you just keep moving forward in that regard. So Dr. Moscata has visited our center. We had a really nice time with her here. And I think going forward, we can look for different ways to have student exchanges, or actually do some research projects in the Philippines. Of course, funding is also a big issue. You have to be able to put together a proposal and get it funded. That's a big challenge, but when you have people who are interested and excited, then you've always got possibilities. So if there are ideas, I'm sure people here would be open to hear them, and vice versa. If we've got some things that we think can work well in the Philippines, you can bet that we will come knocking on your door. So thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Maureen. So we look forward to more future collaborations with World Vegetable Center. So now here is another question from our audience, and I think both of you are free to give your thoughts about this. So he is asking, what are your thoughts on vegetables becoming ornamentals grown in urban gardens and parks? Because it's actually a trend now, so to have vegetables as ornamentals. So
I love it. I love this idea. I think it's fantastic. And one of the exciting things about our new reconstruction project that we're doing here at the center also involves a whole new garden arrangement. We have a very large demonstration garden here, which is quite a beautiful place. And we have more than 200 species of different kinds of vegetables, some traditional, some our improved varieties are all there. But we're going to vastly expand these gardens, and they will be exactly that, incorporating vegetables as a more of an ornamental function, but to show people that you can, vegetables are beautiful. You know, they're not just good for you, they're really pretty plants, and you can combine them with flowers and trees, make a very diverse landscape, a very rich landscape, and a very pleasing landscape. So I'm quite excited about this. We are just creating the new beds right now, and probably by December we'll be able to plant them. And I think when people come to see it, it will be quite stunning and really beautiful. Urban production, very important. If people can produce more food where they live, on their balconies or in their backyards, it's that much closer, you're more likely to eat it. So I think it's a great idea.
I think it's great. I fully support the answer of Maureen.
I see. So actually, also here in the Philippines or in the College of Agriculture, we have what we call edible gardening, wherein we plant vegetables or crops that are aesthetically pleasing in an aesthetically pleasing arrangement, but they are also edible and very good vegetables are vegetables that are usually used in the household. So yes, I think that's also a very good idea. Now we have a question from Malaysia actually. Greetings everyone, I'm Suyi from Malaysia. Would like to ask, is it only those countries who are in partnership with World Veg that can request seeds from the Genebank? Or is it through government agencies that we can request even if we are not in the list of the partner countries of World Vegetable Center?
Yes, thank you for that question. And people from research centers and seed companies from all countries can request seed. We follow the guidelines of the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. That's a mouthful now, but it basically says that we want people to use the germplasm for Malaysia or from any other country.
So yeah, so now for our very last request from the both of you, since we have a lot of viewers right now, especially students and even farmers that are watching our live, so we would like to ask both of you to for a message that you can give to them, especially to the students and the faculty that are watching.
Grow more vegetables, grow them safely, and eat more vegetables. That's my message.
Yeah, enjoy your vegetables, embrace diversity, and good luck with your time at the university.